All right, let's dive into one of the most incredible automated factories on the planet, your digestive system. Seriously, it works 24/7 without ever taking a day off. Today, we're going to follow a single meal on its incredible journey from the very first bite all the way to the end. Let's get into it. I mean, really? Have you ever stopped to think about what's going on in there? You eat a burger, a salad, whatever, and a few hours later, your body has just magically pulled out all the energy and building blocks it needs. How does it do that? Well, that's what we're here to find out. We're going to follow that food step by step.
Okay, but before we jump into the journey itself, let's start with the big picture. Why? Why do our bodies even need food in the first place? What is the ultimate goal of this entire, unbelievably complex process?
You know, it really boils down to three fundamental needs. First, we need fuel. Chemical energy to power literally everything our cells do, from thinking to blinking. Second, we need raw materials. You know, the organic building blocks for growing and repairing our bodies. And finally, there are some things our bodies just can't make. These are the essential nutrients we have to get from our food. Think of these as the mission objectives for every meal we eat.
So here's our roadmap for the journey. The whole thing happens in 5 main stages. First, ingestion. That's the easy part, just eating. Then digestion, the serious work of breaking it all down. After that, absorption, getting all the good stuff into our bloodstream. Then assimilation, when our cells actually put that stuff to use. And finally, egestion, getting rid of what's left over. We're going to hit every single one of these stops.
All right, let's get this trip started. It officially begins right here, at the gateway, the mouth. The second that food passes your lips, 2 critical things kick off at the exact same time. You've got ingestion, of course, but you've also got the very first and super important step of digestion. The mouth is this amazing dual-action system. Mechanically, your teeth get to work, chewing, which isn't just about making food smaller. It's about massively increasing the surface area. Then your tongue expertly rolls it into a neat little ball called a bolus. At the same time, the chemical team, your saliva, gets to work. It lubricates everything, but it also contains these tiny molecular scissors, an enzyme called salivary amylase, which starts breaking down starches from the get-go. So you swallow, and that bolus enters the esophagus. And this isn't just some passive tube where food tumbles down. Oh no, it's an active muscular conveyor belt. The process is called peristalsis, and it's brilliant. Circular muscles squeeze behind the food, pushing it forward, while other muscles in front relax and widen the tube to make way. It's this perfectly coordinated muscular wave. After that quick ride down the esophagus, our food arrives at the next major hub, the stomach. You can think of it as a muscular, churning bag of acid. And this is also where it's about to meet the chemical crew, a whole team of secretions from other organs that are waiting to get to work in the duodenum, which is the very first part of the small intestine. The hydrochloric acid in our stomach is an absolute powerhouse, and it does way more than just dissolve stuff. It has 4 really specific, really crucial jobs. First, it flips the switch on the main protein-digesting enzyme, turning it on. Second, it creates the super acidic conditions that enzyme needs to work its magic. Third, it's a security guard, killing off most of the nasty bacteria we might have eaten. And finally, it starts to unravel complex protein molecules, making them much easier for the enzymes to attack. So you might be wondering, wait a minute, if this acid is so powerful, why doesn't it just digest the stomach itself? And that's a great question. The answer is a brilliant piece of biological engineering. The stomach protects itself with a thick, constantly renewed layer of alkaline mucus that acts as both a physical shield and a chemical barrier against its own potent acid. Okay, so as this acidic, soupy food mixture, which is now called chyme, leaves the stomach and enters the duodenum, the chemical crew gets the call to action. First up to bat, the pancreas. This thing is an absolute enzyme factory. It squirts in a juice packed with enzymes ready to tackle all 3 major food groups: amylase for any leftover starches, trypsin for the proteins, and lipase to start working on the fats. The next member of the crew is bile. It's made in the liver and stored in the gallbladder, and honestly, it's a multitasking genius. Job number 1, it's alkaline, so it neutralizes that harsh stomach acid, creating a much happier environment for the new enzymes. Job number 2 is fascinating. It attacks big blobs of fat and shatters them into millions of tiny little droplets. This is called emulsification. It doesn't chemically digest the fat, but it dramatically increases the surface area so the lipase enzymes can get to work. And just when you think our internal system is pretty amazing, you realize it's not the only way to get the job done. For a truly wild alternative, check out the starfish. It literally shoves its stomach out of its mouth, wraps it around its prey, digests the meal outside its body, and then slurps the nutrient soup back in. How wild is that? All right, at this stage, pretty much all the heavy deconstruction is finished. Our meal has been systematically broken down into its smallest chemical parts. So now we get to the most important part of the entire journey, absorption. It's time to get all those valuable nutrients out of the digestive tube and into the body, and this happens mainly in the ileum, the final long section of the small intestine.
And just to give you a sense of scale here, the small intestine is incredibly long. We're talking about 6 meters, or around 20 feet, in an average adult. That is longer than most cars. This incredible length gives our body a massive amount of time and a huge surface area to make sure not a single useful nutrient gets left behind.
So how does the intestine have so much absorption power? Well, here's the secret. It's not a smooth pipe, not even close. Its inner wall is covered in millions of tiny, finger-like folds called villi. And this chart shows you exactly why that matters. A flat surface? Pretty low absorption. But as you add these villi, the absorption rate just skyrockets. It is an absolute masterclass in maximizing surface area.
This incredible efficiency really comes down to brilliant design on a microscopic level. You've got these big folds, which are covered in villi, which themselves are covered in even tinier microvilli. The wall itself is only 1 cell thick, which makes it a super short trip for nutrients to get across. There's a rich network of blood vessels waiting right there to whisk the nutrients away, and cells are packed with mitochondria, little powerhouses, to actively pull in every last molecule. And here we are, approaching the end of the line. Everything that could be digested and absorbed has been taken care of. So what's left over, mostly water, indigestible stuff like fiber and bacteria, moves into the large intestine for the final bit of processing before it's removed from the body. The main job of the large intestine is to absorb most of that remaining water, which compacts the waste into feces. And this brings us to a really important distinction that often trips people up. The process of getting rid of this undigested food is called egestion. It's different from excretion. Excretion is getting rid of metabolic waste, like urea in urine, stuff that was actually made inside your body's cells. The material being egested was really just passing through the tube the whole time. So that's the whole journey, from top to bottom. But to really lock it all in, let's do a quick rewind. Let's retell the story, but this time from the perspective of the molecules themselves, a carbohydrate, a protein, and a fat. First up, let's follow a starch molecule, say from a piece of bread. Its digestion starts almost instantly, right in the mouth, thanks to salivary amylase. That process pauses in the stomach's acid, but then pancreatic amylase in the duodenum picks up right where it left off. Finally, other enzymes on the intestine wall deliver the final snip, breaking it down into simple glucose, which is finally small enough to be absorbed. Okay, next up, protein. Its journey starts later, not until it hits the stomach. Here, the enzyme pepsin acts like a big pair of shears, chopping the long protein chains into shorter ones. Then, in the duodenum, another enzyme, trypsin, chops them down even smaller. And finally, other enzymes finish the job, breaking them into their individual building blocks, amino acids, which are then absorbed. And finally, the unique journey of a fat molecule. Pretty much nothing happens to it in the mouth or the stomach. It's not until it reaches the duodenum that the action starts. First, bile comes in and emulsifies it, breaking it into tiny droplets. Only then can the lipase enzymes actually get in there and break it down into fatty acids and glycerol, ready for absorption. And that brings us to our final thought for today, something to chew on. The entire digestive tract, from your mouth all the way to the other end, is really just one long tube passing through your body. The food inside that tube is never truly inside you until it gets absorbed. So if you think about it from a certain point of view, are you more like a solid sphere or a very, very complex donut? Thanks for joining me on this journey.